Good afternoon and good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to our next installment of the Rugby Canada webinar series. We are pleased to have Alana Gattinger join us today. She will run you through a bit more of a background as to what her role is exactly, but she is our National Senior Men's Team Manager and has been in the role for quite a few years now, and if anyone has time to go back and dig through World Rugby's news archives, there was a great piece on how Alana was the first and only female manager at the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan. So she'll fill us in on what that role was all about and help you all prepare for taking a team out on tour. First of all, on behalf of Rugby Canada, we want to thank everyone for making the time to come on. We have worked diligently to put on a series of webinars throughout the suspension of rugby, and we will continue to do so. I'll do a little plug at the end for what's coming up next, but in the meantime, just another quick reminder that we are under a suspension of rugby activities in person, but we are working on trying to diversify our online content. It's a good way for us to be able to communicate with our rugby membership in a different way. For those of you who are new to the GoToWebinar control panel, there is a feature for you to be able to put your hand up. We ask that you not use that, but there is a chat feature or a question box rather, where you can put some questions in. Alana will go through her presentation. We have a couple of moments within where we will break for a couple of questions, so please feel free to throw them in, and then I will help Alana moderate through that. So if anyone has any questions, please fire away, and I will get back to you as Alana goes through. Otherwise, Alana, all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate the little intro there. And thanks to everyone who's signed on. I'm pretty excited to present to everyone today and talk about what team management and tour management is all about. What I've done to kind of preface the presentation is to do just a top 10 tips for tour managers, just little things to keep in mind that are really important to the success of being a tour manager. So just to give you a bit of background on myself before we get started, as Nathan said, I'm the National Men's 15s team manager. I have been with Rugby Canada for almost 8 years now, so as he said, quite a long time. And I came to Rugby Canada as an intern actually when I was doing my master's in sports management, and then came on full time after I finished that program. I've worked a couple of different roles in the organization, but in the last 5.5 years, my main focus has been in team management. So I've managed our senior men's program, as well as managing our U20 program for a year, which presented a different challenge for me there, which was a pretty exciting opportunity. And overall, I've been on over 20 tours, and 2 of which were Rugby World Cups. So I was the assistant manager in England at the 2015 Rugby World Cup, and I was the team manager in Japan for the 2019 Rugby World Cup. So that's just a little bit about me. So our first slide here is our main challenges. So what I tried to do is try to make this presentation relatable for all levels of management. So there could be team managers on here who are going on age grade club or high school tours up to senior national team tours. So what I wanted to do is look at what challenges do we all face no matter what level of rugby we're working in. So the 3 that I came up with were people management. So no matter what, we're all going to have people to deal with. We've got players and staff on tour with us. We've got family members back home, or some even travel on tours, service providers, host clubs, unions, schools, tournament organizers. So there's lots of different people, lots of different personalities that you have to manage, and expectations that you have to work with and help deliver. So there's lots of different people involved. There's also emergency situations that you'll face, which are quite a challenge for us. Sometimes, you might have a medical emergency where a player has to go to the hospital from training. Maybe there's a family emergency back home and a player or staff member has to travel back home to handle that. So it's dealing with that personal level as well as a logistical level, helping people get where they need to go. And then you could be facing maybe a natural disaster. I know there's some tours that were out during the beginning of the COVID-19 situation. So, dealing with that would have been quite a stressful situation for a team manager. And then I have my own experience working with a natural disaster. Obviously in Japan in 2019, we had Typhoon Hagibis hit Kamaishi, where we were prepping for our final match. And unfortunately, because of that, we had to cancel our final match. So not only are we dealing with the situation of a typhoon and a natural disaster, but we're also dealing with disappointment of a match of a Rugby World Cup being canceled, and how do we deal with that on a personal level. And then the final challenge that I feel that we face, that we probably face the most often, is change. So whether a coach wants to make a change to a daily schedule, which then has a waterfall effect, and you're changing bus schedules, meal schedules, all of those pieces. Could be flight delays where your flight lands a couple hours late and now either your day's pushed back or you have less sleep or things like that. And then it could be a bus is late. So you might be, the bus arrives 30 minutes late. So now your whole day is pushed back for training and everything. So it's just adjusting those things. And I think all of those three things are challenges that we all face on tours that I think we just need to be ready to act on. So the first tip that I have is to always focus on the solution. It's a pretty simple one, but it's the key to success, I think. Remaining positive and calm in all situations that are unexpected and challenging is really important. So focus on the solution instead of dwelling on the problem. An example that I can draw upon here is in 2017, the senior national team was in Spain, and we were preparing for our international match there, our test match against Spain. The team was in the team meeting prior to getting on the bus going to the venue. So I'm outside, check, I see the bus is there, everything looks good. The team all leaves the room. We get out to the bus and the door is locked, so no one can get on the bus. So that's when the stress sets in for me, but you have to go into solution mode. So you're looking at, okay, let's knock on the bus, see if anybody's inside it, maybe ask another staff member, maybe go and check if the bus driver might be just using the washroom. Then you're looking at, am I calling liaison officers to get them to support with, calling the bus company or calling the Spanish Union to help support on that end. Obviously, all of this is going on at the same time as the whole team is, in the moments where they've just had their pre-match talk, they're getting focused for the game, they're doing their pre-match rituals, they have their music in, and the last thing you want to do is distract them from the task at hand, which is beating Spain in a test match. So remaining calm and positive in that situation is the key. The solution was going to be get everybody in taxis and we have to head to the match straight away. Luckily, 2 minutes later, the bus driver woke up from his nap on the back of the bus and came his way up to the front and let us in. And we were a few minutes late getting to the match. But in the grand scheme, keeping a cool head in that situation was the most important. You're basically managing the experience of the team members in that situation. Tip number 2 is to foster relationships with your staff. So staff are the key to working together. We all have the same goal of making sure that we have the most successful tour possible. So getting everybody on the same page to look at what our goals are, confirm what our roles and responsibilities are for each person, to make sure we all know that we're all doing a big piece to make sure that the team is successful. So we're all going to experience ups and downs of tours together. So it's really important to build that trust early, know that everybody knows their role and is ready to execute it. I think from a high performance perspective, my most important relationship is with the head coach. I need to build trust with him or her to make sure that they know that whatever I'm doing is for the best of the team. They always need to trust that that's my main focus. So for example, we've gone to Uruguay and our training field was flooded. So unfortunately we had to find an alternative venue. I know what the coach likes to see in a venue. So in that case, we've had that conversation and built up that relationship for him to tell me what his preferences are. And then I go out and try to find the best possible solution for the team in that case. And he has to trust that I'm doing that. So I think for me, that's the biggest relationship to build and remain positive. Some of you may be a bit different in the situation. Some of you might be the head coach and the team manager or tour manager on your tours, depending on what level of the game you're working in. So you obviously would have a great relationship with that person, but you've also got other people to manage and people that you might not know as well. So you might have a new medical staff that you're working with, or you've got parents who are volunteering as chaperones on the tour potentially. Those people are all people that you need to get on side. So whether they're volunteers or not, getting everybody on a call prior to going on the tour and having conversations with them about their skill set, about what they're comfortable doing, and then look at how can we use everybody's skill sets to the best ability to make sure that we have a successful tour. And just building that relationship and getting to know who they are, I think is really important. You have to understand your network of support in order to make sure that you can get the best out of them. Tip number 3 is to pre-plan daily schedules. So planning your daily schedules, your full tour itinerary, is really important to do prior to going on tour. Now we do that with a few people, our S&C coach, our head coach, and our head physio. Those are the main people that have input in the schedule, but overall the head coach is responsible to approve the schedule and confirm that that's what he or she wants done. For us, I find it a lot easier to adjust an existing schedule that I've created than creating a whole new one every evening. So here's an example of what our day sheet would look like when we're going on tour. So if we're going on tour, and say we're going on tour for 2 weeks, we would have one of these sheets for each day. So we'd have 14. Sometimes we go on tours as long as 6 weeks or longer. So if it's a 6-week tour, you're looking at 42 of these that we're creating, down to the level of detail that you can see on screen. Now, that's what works for us in our program. It's down to the 30-minute block. There's details of travel times from the hotel. All of those pieces are involved to give as much detail as we can to the team to make sure that they're prepared and ready to go, focused for what we have at hand. So how we build these schedules is pretty simple. The key components are, number one, physical preparation. So that's making sure that the rugby and gym sessions are included and we're getting what we need out of the team to make sure that they're ready to go come game day. So that's what our head coach and S&C coach would work on together to make sure that we've got the right programming there. They would also put in any team meetings that we'd have and content that needs to be covered prior to going on the tour, or sorry, going to the training session. And then they'd also have any recovery. So you can see in there's a nap slot and there's recovery at the hotel. We do pool sessions. Those are things that happen on a daily basis to make sure that the players are getting the recovery they need. On top of that, after I've done that with those two individuals, our S&C and head coach, I would speak to our medical staff to make sure that I know what they need included, whether it's time for taping ahead of key sessions that have a lot of tape required, any high contact sessions, as well as treatment slots for them to make sure that they're giving the players the recovery and the treatment that they need to be back on field the next day. So on top of that, after that happens, I would work with our nutritionist or S&C coach to confirm meal times are sufficient for the players to get the nutrition that they need. And then I would include any of the logistics around travel times and things of that nature. Maybe any, if there's media or if we have staff meetings, I include all of those extra pieces on top of that. So it's a big team effort. And then obviously, if we're looking at it, we've planned this 2 months in advance, and we get to the day and there's some adjustments, maybe we need to cancel one of the sessions or something like that, we can make that adjustment a lot more easily than if we were building this whole thing from scratch every evening. Are there any questions around the first 3 points?
Not specifically around those points, but Alana, you mentioned needing to make sure that the rugby happens. How do you build flexibility into your daily schedule to allow for that to make sure it happens? So if something critical arises at the end of the day, how do you make sure that we get to the most important pieces while keeping the rest of everybody else happy, whether it's your coach or the medical or the S&C? How do you build that in to your schedule?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little difficult to anticipate problems such as that, but what I would say is that the best thing is to have that communication with each of the key areas, so the medical, S&C, and rugby, and head coach. So have that communication with them to say, okay, well, we think we need to adjust this, or this thing has come up, what's taking priority here? And then we make that call as a group to make sure that the team's getting what they need in the end, but we're also delivering all the expectations. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Good to go.
Awesome. Okay, moving along. So tip number 4 is to prepare key admin. Now, for me, key admin is something that's going to help you in the case of when something is happening quickly, you need to be able to access your information quickly. So the first one is to have all of your travelers' passports, a copy of them. So whether that's a passport if you're leaving the country, or another relevant ID if you're staying in province or in country, but I would always recommend a passport if you can. The passport has all of the information that you'd need if you were having an emergency situation. You've got the date of birth, their full name, and then you've got the image of the individual as well. So that's all covering that. Plus, on top of that, if you're traveling internationally and a player or staff member misplaces their passport, which has happened a few times. Then you have that image of the passport to make sure it's as smooth as possible to get that person home so that they can get a replacement passport, so that they're traveling, they're safe, and they're not stuck in another country because they've lost their passport. The second one is to have an emergency contact for each traveler saved into your phone. Now, I know a lot of team managers probably just have the emergency contact list on their computer, or maybe printed out if they use paper and they're having a binder with them. But I find having that saved in your phone is just going to save you time in a key high stress situation where you would need to use an emergency contact. So I would just make sure when I'm saving that contact in my phone, I also include the player or staff member's name, and then write emergency contact. So if I'm searching in an emergency, I'm searching the player's name in my phone, not only does the player's contact information come up, but their emergency contact comes up automatically as well, even if they don't share a last name or something like that. So it just makes it really easy, and you know, in a high stress situation like that, you've got that access really easily. The third one is to have a copy of your insurance policy details. So saving the phone number of your insurance policy, or your insurance company, sorry, in your phone, that's there, it's nice and handy. But then I also, in the notes section of that, I would save the policy number, so that when you're trying to open a claim, if you're on the way to the hospital or something and opening a claim for that individual, you've got the policy number handy there, so you don't have to go trying to rifle around paperwork or in your computer to find that. So that's another time saver there. And then the fourth one is to have a list of individuals' allergies. So you might find out allergies when you're doing menus, whether someone has a nut allergy or a seafood allergy, but there's other allergies that exist out there that could happen, you know, when you're at a training session, such as someone might have an allergy to bee stings. So that's something that happens when you're outside on a training pitch. And so having that information ahead of time just makes sure that you know how to take care of the safety of each individual, that, you know, your medical staff is also aware and they have the EpiPen ready to go should an issue arise. Tip number 5 is to plan for travel. Now, this is kind of looking at pre-planning further in advance here. So when you're looking at visa rules for the country or countries that you're going to, you need to make sure that you know what passports people in your group have, and then make sure that they would have all the proper paperwork ahead of travel, so you don't have any issues when you're going through immigration. So you might need a visa or an ESTA, or you might need to pay reciprocity fees. These are all things that, you know, different countries have different rules for different countries. So for example, when we travel to Brazil every other year for the ARC, Canadians do need a visa. So I do a lot of applications around there, but we have other people who might hold a UK or France or New Zealand passport, and those individuals don't need one for Brazil. So just understanding the policies, and then also the timelines for how long it actually takes to do these applications, to make sure that you leave enough time to make sure that everyone will have the paperwork before travel. And then for, you know, if you're traveling to the US and maybe you're driving across border instead of flying, you still need to think about those things. Maybe because you're not getting on a plane, you wouldn't think as much, but you know, if you have anyone who doesn't have a Canadian or American passport, they may need a visa or an ESTA, which is, you know, just you need a 48 hours notice to do that application, and it's a quick online application, but you need to have it in order for them to get through smoothly. So just looking ahead at those types of things is really important. And then the second section here is about packing. So packing for, as a team manager, there's a few essentials that as a rugby team you're going to need. So you know you're going to need balls, pennies, cones for training. You're going to need a ball pump to make sure those to make sure those balls are pumped up. Match kit, medical supplies, those are things that are essentials that if you're going to go have a rugby tour and play a game, you need to have those things. Now, there's lots of other things that you could bring on tour with you as well, and we have a pretty extensive packing list. So I'm quite lucky that I work with some great individuals who are very independent in their areas of expertise. So our S&C and nutritionists, they pack gym gear and our supplements. Our head physio packs all of our medical gear. Our analyst packs all the analysis gear. And then I would pack all the other things, the rugby equipment for on field, any kit that we'd need, any gifting like plaques that we would give to our opposition, flags for setup, all of those little things that would come into making sure that we have the look and feel of the Canadian team. Those are all things that I'm responsible for packing. So there's quite a long list of things that we would travel with. So I create a baggage checklist to make sure we know what we're bringing and how many bags and what's in them. So this is what one of my packing lists looks like, so my checklist. So this one is actually one that we used for the Pacific Nations Cup tour last summer. As you can see, there's a lot of bags that we travel with, up to almost 30 here for just one tour. That was a 4-week tour. So we've got lots of things that we need to make sure that we're hitting our high performance goals, and we're looking at, taking care of the players from a medical perspective with 10 bags. So there's lots of things that I need to manage to know we have them. So I would get the list of what goes in each bag from our medical staff or our S&C staff. And then I know what bags are which, so I know what they look like. So I would create this. And then when we get to the airport, if bags are checked on players' names or my name, whoever's checked it, I write down who checked it. And then when we get to the other end, when we're finally arriving in our destination and we're checking bags off to say what's arrived, we'll know that if we're missing manager 5, I know that I go to that person who I wrote their name in that section checked by. I collect the bag tag from them because they're told to keep the bag tags. And then I would go and make a claim. It's really easy to make a claim when you have the bag tag handy, you know what the bag looks like, and you know what's in the bag. On top of that, knowing what's in the bag is really important here, because if I know that we've landed and manager 5 hasn't arrived, I know that that's got pennies, balls, and water bottles. So that's essential stuff for training. So I need to get right on top of that with contacting our local hosts or the union that we're visiting and say, hey guys, this didn't arrive. We're going to need support on finding this. And then that way we've got people working on it straight away. So I'm not waiting till I get to the hotel to look through the bags to see what I'm missing. I'm able to get right on top of it and find a solution. So tip number 5 continued here is now more about immediate planning for travel when it's in the next couple of days. So the first one is to contact your airport or travel agent to see what process they would like to use for group check-in. Sometimes airlines or airports will set up group check-in desks, and sometimes they don't want to do that and they just want to check your group in through the regular lineup with all of the regular agents at the front. So understanding what process they would like to follow and using that is the best way forward, because you're going to have the most efficient when you're working with them in the processes that they like to follow or protocols they follow. So normally what I would do is I would try to arrive at the airport early to make sure that I have some communication first with the individuals who are at the check-in desk to make sure that everyone's comfortable with the process and how we're going to run things on our end to make sure that it all is smooth. And then that way, when the team arrives on the bus, I'm able to direct traffic and explain the process and then get everybody checked in as efficiently as possible. The next one is about contacting your bus company who's actually going to be picking you up on the other end to confirm all of your arrangements. So that's to make sure that you understand what the airport looks like. So as we said, every airport is different. Some airports are small and you go straight from the baggage pickup area and outside and there's the bus. Some are huge, like Pearson. You have to call a dispatch number to make sure the bus is released to go to pick you up at a particular bus bay, and to get there you have to take an elevator and walk a little bit. So just understanding that kind of process helps you to guide the group and make sure that their first experience on ground where you are is a smooth one as well. And then the little extra tip, just get the bus driver's information if you can. That way you can speak to them directly to say, hey, we're on our way, just collected our baggage, should be there in 5 minutes. So then they know to expect you and can have everything ready. And then the final one is to contact the hotel to make sure that they are ready for your arrival. So I always contact them a couple of days out to give them our final rooming list to make sure that everyone's ready to go. And then I request that they give us a key packet for each individual person. And then it also has the Wi-Fi information in it. That helps to make sure everyone gets a key, so no one's looking for a roommate trying to all get together to go up to the room together. Everyone has their own, everyone gets on the elevators and heads up. Then they also have the Wi-Fi information, because I find that if I don't get that information to them quickly, I'm bombarded with the same question of what's the Wi-Fi. So just trying to solve problems ahead of them happening is the key idea here. Any questions on that?
Lana, we have a few. So I apologize, I missed one earlier, but it had to do with the team behind the team. You spoke about, all the staff who are involved and mentioned your relationship with the coach. So one of the questions is around what kind of personality traits seem to work best when you're working with a coach, and who might be one of the better coaches you've worked with?
Yeah, so I think personality is key. You have to understand who you're working with. Is it someone who likes to have a laugh and a joke and you can make a bit of fun, or is it someone who's super serious? I think being a manager, you have to be able to be flexible to how that person works, because they're ultimately in charge. So you want to work with them how they think and how they can work. So you have to be quite flexible as a manager. And I think my favorite coach, not to pick favorites here, but my favorite coach that I've worked with is actually the one I'm working with right now. Kingsley is an absolute joy to work with. He has a laugh, but he's also serious and gets the job done. And I think the way that we work and interface has worked out really well. We've got a friendship as well as a colleague relationship. So yeah.
Okay, great. And then a couple of questions around your packing strategy. Two parts. One is, how far in advance of a trip are you looking to get your overall planning done? And second is, how do you split things in different bags if you don't necessarily have the ability to get things where you're going? So for instance, cones, balls, pennies, if a bag gets lost, would you consider splitting them amongst different bags?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it depends on obviously how many bags you're traveling with. If you're able to split things up a little bit, I usually do put balls in 2 bags just in case. So then I at least, if I'm bringing 20, I've got 10 in one, 10 in another, just to kind of hedge my bets on that. I think from a packing perspective, I have a master packing list of things that I know need to come on tour with us, that I have kind of ongoing, all from previous tours, where I look at it at the end of the tour, or when we're somewhere and I notice I don't have something I would need, I would add that to my packing list. And then I go through the list and make sure that I'm prepared with everything I have ready to go. Usually I pack about a week in advance, so that if there is an issue, I can go to the store and pick up all the little bits that I would need, or solve that ahead of time with our kit department, or making sure I have the equipment that I need. So it just depends on obviously what level and what you're comfortable with, how much access you have to that equipment. And then if you've got other people packing, it's also good. You don't want to be a micromanager, but you want to make sure they're on top of things. So communicating early and just making sure they know what they're bringing. And then the same for the players. I'm not a micromanager, so I'm not going to tell them to bring a toothbrush and a certain number of underwear, but I'm going to tell them, these are the kit items that you need to bring. This is what you'll receive from me on this tour. And then give them a list of other items, like make sure you have a notebook and pen, because you're expected to have that at all of your meetings. If you have a roller, bring it. If you have a water bottle, bring it. Bring it Tupperware, those kinds of things. Those are all on the list that I would communicate to the group ahead of time. But making sure that I have on my master list, I have everything I know I'd need, and then I check it off about a week in advance to make sure I have it ready to go.
Great. Actually, that answers one of the other questions that was on here about a list for players. But on another piece around players is, how do you get team buy-in? Because the reality is, you and the staff can't carry 30 bags along with your own gear. So how do you get player buy-in to help out with carrying the gear and packing gear and making sure that everything's ready for training and or a trip overseas?
Yeah, we're quite lucky where we've got a great group of players, a great group of human beings. So they understand that they need all those things that are in those bags. We're not just bringing them for the fun of it. So they do their part. Everybody carries bags when needed. It's, no one is too big or too small to do the job. So, everyone helps taking things off, checking off on the list, packing it on the bus, and moving it into the hotel where it needs to go. So we've got a great culture that we've built around that, of everyone doing their part to help it be successful. And then from a packing perspective, that's more of a staff responsibility, and that stays with us. So that's part of me. I'm making sure that all the bags are ready to go, maybe the night before we're traveling, the following day, or something like that. So that the actual physical packing of it is a staff responsibility.
Right. Okay. Time for moving on, but we will keep collecting questions. Also, Jeff Hassler says hello, Alana, and was curious whether or not Kingsley asked the question about who your favorite coach was. I will say that it was not Mr. Jones, Jeff.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for joining. All right, moving along. So tip number 6. This one is a big one, and I think it's one that probably causes people quite a bit of stress ahead of tours. So getting yourself as prepared as possible for emergency situations is really important. So the first one is to make sure you have an EAP, or an emergency action plan, for all of the venues that you're training or playing at. So that's something that you would get from the venue. They are usually able to just supply that really quickly and easily. And then that's something you'd pass along to your medical staff and keep on file for yourself as well. So once you pass it along to your medical staff, that opens up the communication with them to make sure that you guys can have a discussion around what happens in the case of an emergency. So then you can confirm, okay, who's going to be the charge person, who will be the call person, and who will be the control person, which are the main 3 things you need in an emergency in that situation. So that opens up that communication so you can all have that chat and make sure you're all comfortable with the solutions there. The second piece is to make sure that you have a full and clear understanding of your insurance and what's included, what's covered in your policy, and making sure, as I said before, you have that contact information handy at all times if you need to open up a claim, and knowing what you need to open your claim. So whether, for us, it's I need to have the player's name, date of birth, and their home address. So that's something I have ready to go, but sometimes you might need other things. So just talking to your insurance company before you travel to make sure you know what you'd need to be able to provide them with. And then on top of that, for our insurance company, they also want to provide us with a list of approved facilities that we can use when we're in a particular area. So prior to tour, I can communicate with our insurance company. I would send them the address of our hotel, our training venues, and our match venues. And then they would send me a complete list of facilities that are approved for them to provide guarantee of payment for. The worst thing is showing up to a hospital and not having all that in line, and then they're telling you that you need to pay thousands of dollars for a service that should be included on your insurance, but there's some sort of communication issue between that and the hospital. So just being as prepared as possible, knowing what is provided, knowing where you can go, it keeps it really clear for you. And then I would recommend anyone that could be accompanying an individual to the hospital should be aware of that information. So from our perspective at the high performance level with the staff that we have, the 4 people that are key for me that need to have this information is 1, myself, our head physio, assistant physio, and physician or doctor. So those 4 people are the people that could accompany someone to a hospital if there is an emergency situation. So they should all have the information about the insurance. And on top of that, they should all be comfortable with going to the hospital. So making sure you have that communication. If you're a smaller staff or volunteer group, and you maybe have a parent or chaperone who's coming, make sure you've had that communication with them to say, are you comfortable going to a hospital? Do you feel prepared enough with the information? What can I do to help? And if they say they're not comfortable, that's fine. Plan around it. So you can make sure you know who would go in every situation. We have different situations. So if it's in a training situation, I would travel to the hospital with the individual because our medical staff are more important to be with the rest of the group who's still in the middle of a training session. If we're going during a match, if someone has to leave during the match, in that case, we would send our second physio because I would be doing all the substitutions and match management. So then our head physician and our head physio are still on field providing care for the players who are in game. And then if someone has to go post-match, it would normally be myself because the other 3 are providing care for the players post-match and doing all the post-match assessments to make sure we're ready to go for moving forward and ensuring that the players are ready to go for the next matches. So I know emergency situations are a bit more of a high pressure situation. So does anyone have any specific questions around that now?
Not at the moment, but if we do, I will definitely circle back, knowing that this is obviously a vital piece for any team that goes away on tour, especially if you're going overseas. The other thing I will say is Alana was very specific about not mentioning any particular insurance, knowing we might have people from abroad. So some generic information about how to access your insurance through your own company will be important. However, just a note that if you do have questions about Rugby Canada's travel insurance for a traveling team, if you were able to get that through the typical process, is to go through members@rugby.ca, and they'll be able to help you out. So Alana, if oh, there is one emergency related type question here now. Do you always travel with a physician? And if you don't, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so I would say that on probably at least 75% of our tours as a senior national program, we do. A lot of our rugby or World Rugby tournaments that we attend require us to have a physician. On the times that we don't, if we're traveling to somewhere when it's we've planned a tour maybe against club teams or something like that. If we're not traveling with a physician, we would work with that host club to make sure that they provide us with a local contact of somebody who could provide us with care, whether it's someone who can legally write prescriptions in that area so that we can get that sorted for a player, or just, again, making sure that you know what facilities you're going to be able to use. And if you do need to see a physician in a non-emergent situation, you can still go and do that, depending on your insurance coverage, of course, but go to a local facility there, wherever you are, to get care there.
Awesome. I'll loop back again, Alana, if we have any more of these related questions, but otherwise good to continue.
Super. Thank you, Nathan. All right, so tip number 7 is to develop a rapport with your host. So a host can be anyone from a club, union, or school representative, someone you've been planning your match or tour with. Could be a liaison officer who's on the ground support that's provided to you. Could be a tournament organizer, or even a bus driver, someone who is with the club daily, getting you to and from your sessions. Having a rapport with them is really important, because if your training session is running 30 minutes long, being able to go to the bus driver and say, hey, Tom, I'm really sorry, but are you able to stay 30 minutes? It looks like we're going to be running over. Having that relationship with someone and just building that small piece of a relationship, I think is, for me, it's a key to my success. I think relying on people who have the skill set, maybe in the local area, maybe they know the language or the culture, especially when you're in different countries, is essential. So in this here, you'll see some images of myself with, the first one is with our tournament organizers in Japan, who are people that are helping plan our team services experience. So making sure that we have what we need on the ground, and if we don't, I can go to them and say, hey, this isn't working well, we need support on getting this provision. And having that relationship with them and having a positive experience with them when they know you're only coming to them if it's essential, they're happy to help you, and it works out really well for me. And then having our team liaison officers, that's the other image there. Those were individuals that were assigned with us. They were with us 24/7 when we were in Japan, and they were absolutely invaluable for me. They both have different skill sets, but both are super valuable to what we do. So I think getting to know them and getting to know their skills and just them as human beings helps you in the long run, because you're able to get the most out of them, and they can provide you with the support that you need on the ground. In Japan, it's a very different culture, especially business culture there. So getting things done, you have to go through different processes, and I wouldn't have understood that if I didn't have that local support. So having them is, for me, it's absolutely the key to my success there. And for me, I still maintain friendships with a lot of our liaisons from overseas or different places in Canada. And I think just growing the international rugby community and my personal community it's one of my favorite things, and rugby is great for that. So tip number 8 is to set goals and culture for the tour. So you have to decide, are you going on a tour where you want to win and perform, or like a high performance tour, or are you going on a social team building kind of more personal experience tour where the goal is having fun and seeing a bit of the world or a different place in your province or in Canada. So understanding that from the get-go will help you set that culture expectations or standards of what you're going to accept from the team. For me, engaging as many people as possible in this process is important. So that way you get buy-in from the players. They set a standard that they find to be reasonable, and then you can implement it and they enforce it. They do self-enforcement of it. The leaders lead by example, and I just find it flows a lot better. Some examples of culture for our team would be, we can't wear training kit to meals, maybe wear polos at dinner, no phones at meals. What is our policy if somebody's late? What happens? And then, does your team have an alcohol policy? That's something that just getting ahead of that and communicating it to the team is really important to get their buy-in, and then everyone supports it, and then obviously it goes with the culture. And I find having that to be implemented by the players is the key to success there. From the senior team perspective, we're quite lucky because we have a lot of returning players. So they've got experience in the culture that we've set on previous tours, and so that's what they bring to the program. And then when you have a new player, they're taken under the wing of the older guy who's been on tours, who can help them get up to speed on what we do. So yes, we do review our culture, but we're not having to reset it every tour. Whereas with the U20 team, when I was with them, we had only 5 returning players from the year previous. So you're kind of rebuilding from the get-go there. So we were quite lucky. We had the opportunity to have the whole team together, brainstorm what kind of culture we would set for ourselves, and then they bought into it because they came up with it. So it's great to that, and you can help guide them in the right direction with thinking of ideas of what standards to accept, but getting their buy-in is key there. And I think when you have a strong culture, the tours just run a lot more smoothly. Tip number 9 is to prepare for game day. Game day is your most important day or days of tour. So making sure that you're as prepared as possible to help the team be successful is key. So, you know, we would have a staff meeting before each match day. All of us sit down and look at what are our staff roles and responsibilities for match day. Whether it's the first game of tour, we're doing a longer meeting, or if it's the second or third game of tour when we've had a few under our belt, we're still having that meeting and looking at, okay, what worked in last game? What did we experience that we might need to adjust? And then adjusting for that to make sure that we are as well prepared as possible. So discussions in that could be up to, you know, who's setting up the dressing room, which medical staff members are on field and who's on the bench, who's running water, who's handling substitutions, is anyone filming the match? If we don't have broadcast angles, do we need someone end on? Those types of things, just making sure we're all on the same page and we're thinking about all of the different areas of the game that we would need to cover off. And the other piece is just making sure from a medical perspective, again, we know the EAP. Do we have an ambulance? Is the host providing an ambulance or other physicians on site to provide support? So making sure everyone's aware of that is key, because if someone needs to go off site because there was no ambulance or, you know, something like that, then you know how to handle it. So it's just making sure everyone's as aware of as possible. And then things like post-match function. Is there something going on after the match that people need to prepare for before they go to the match? Leaving as much information about post-match as possible away for after, but, you know, are they wearing polos post-match? Is there a menu or a dinner at the field? Are you having to go off-site? Just knowing those types of things and making sure that that's clear for your coaching staff is important as well. The most important thing, though, I think, is a run sheet. So that was something that I noticed when I worked with the U20 level that they weren't doing prior, but I think it's really important for game day for players to have the mindset of what's going on in game. So this is a sample run sheet that we use. This was actually the one that we used for the South African match at the Rugby World Cup. So it looks like a decent amount of information, but it's all essential information for the players to be aware of. So it's not too much. You can obviously adjust it to what works for your team or your program, but making sure that there's enough information there that if a player is trying to make sure he's ready for a certain time, he or she is ready for a certain time, they can look at this. I print out a couple of copies and post them throughout the dressing room. And then we also make sure we have a large clock so that everyone can see what time it is, and then make sure that they're accountable for what time they're expected to be somewhere. It just gives them a time to, they know how much time when they arrive at the stadium, how much time they have before they have to be out on field. They know how much time they have from when they come back in from warm up until they have to leave the changing room. So those types of things, just getting that in their head, but without, you know, they can just read it instead of having to come and find you and ask you all the time. It kind of, I think it gives them a little bit less stress. And then we also put a halftime plan in. That's something that that our head coach wanted. They want to know how much time is in the halftime. We've had anywhere between 8 and 15 minutes in halftime. So it's important to make sure that they're aware of how much time they're actually going to have between. And then they have a plan for what they're actually doing, whether it's split meetings with backs and forwards, or if they're all together. So that's that. Then the last tip is tip number 10, post-tour review. So doing a review is important, that no matter what level that you're working at, so whether you're at a high school level or a senior level, self-reflection and looking at what went well so that you can help the next tour that goes out from that high school, or the next tour that you go on as a senior national team, that you can improve on the last one. So engaging everyone is the most important. Make sure that all staff have the opportunity to give their feedback. We found at the age grade levels, some of the best feedback that we get is actually from our physios, because they're bringing a different perspective to it. They have more time where they're talking with players, and they're a bit more objective, you know, looking at everything from the outside. So getting everyone's feedback is really important, because you never know who's going to give you the most insightful stuff. And then just looking at, if you're trying to keep it simple, you don't want a massive report, but you just want to get an idea of what everyone felt about the tour, I would recommend just doing a keep, stop, start. So whether that's on a phone call with everyone, or you send an email to your staff or volunteers and you get them to shoot you an email back. Keep, what went well, what do we think that we should keep doing on the next tour? What should we stop doing? What did not go well on this tour? And then what should we start? Maybe some ideas for how you can improve the experience that you had on that tour. So that's it. Those are my top 10 tips. And I can take it to questions from Nathan.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, Alana. I think without going to questions, I think everyone would probably agree there's an incredible amount of work that goes on behind the scenes and prior to actually getting a team off the ground prior to tour, to make sure that that you're able to have success while you're out there, and maintain, you know, a good sense of player safety and everyone's well-being. So definitely appreciate all the information. If you don't mind, Alana, we're going to bounce around a little bit based on some of the questions, some really good ones. When it comes to off days, do you lean more to organize team activities, or do you just kind of let the players have and staff have free time? And why would it be one or the other?
I think it really is dependent on the tour and the group that you're with. So if there's people that, you know, some of our staff members are people that really need some alone time and they regenerate better that way. And some people like to be with people and having fun and doing things. So I don't like to force anything on anyone. We might do at the beginning of a tour a fun staff outing if we have a day off and the players can do their own thing. That would build you up at the beginning, but then it gives the opportunity on, if there's more days off, to give people their own space, and kind of let them regenerate how they need to, because tours are extremely busy. Everyone works nonstop throughout the day. You get, you know, a couple hours to sleep and you do it again the next day. So if someone, you know, people need to know what they need to do for themselves to be ready to go for the rest of the, you know, 2 to 6 week tour. So I think leaving it open for that. And I think from a player perspective, what I normally do is we have a leadership group that we work with, and we have someone who's in charge of what we call entertainment. So I would go to the entertainment lead and just say, hey, what do you guys have in mind? Are you looking to need a bus to where, if you want to do something? Do you need help with planning something? That puts the onus on them to decide what they'd like to do. Come to me and then I can help support them and plan it. But I find that to be the easiest, because again, I think you're going to find guys that all want to do different things. So forcing a team activity isn't always the best option. If it's your first time on a tour together as a group, probably doing a team activity on the first little bit is important, as I said, with our staff as well, to just get everybody built up and spend time around each other and learn about each other, rather than giving everyone the opportunity to do their own thing. But I think, yeah, I think it changes depending on where you're at on tour, and how much time your group has spent together.
That's a great segue into this next question around what are some examples of fun activities that you've seen done in the evenings, just to keep things fun and build some team camaraderie?
Yeah, so we have a great entertainment crew. Jeff has, I think, been a part of it many times, so if he wants to give a comment on that. But I think, you know, the guys tend to do their own thing, so they might do a poker night or something like that, a movie night. You just put a movie on in the team room and guys can join if they want to. Sometimes they'll do like a Jeopardy quiz. It requires a bit of work from the entertainment crew, but I think those kinds of things are fun, and you know, you might still laugh about it. I can think of a couple Jeopardies we did a couple tours ago, and you know, they were quite funny. So I think it's just whatever the guys have ideas that they think are going to be something that the team will enjoy, I think is the best thing to do, because you know, if you have a poker night but nobody plays poker, there's no point in doing that. Some of our guys like to do puzzles, so we have a puzzle on tour with us, and that's kind of a group thing where the guys can go and have fun doing that. So it really depends on what everyone's into, but I think having a leadership group where you've got an entertainment side of things, and that group can plan and kind of gauge what the guys are into doing, or girls are into doing, sorry. I think that's probably the best way to go about it.
Great. Jeff sent a quick message to say rookie skit night. So I think we can all deduce from that what that means, but probably getting the rookies to put on some sort of play or quick skit for the team at some point during the tour, eh?
Yeah, that's good fun. And thanks, Jeff, for your input. Really appreciate it. You can do the presentation next time if you want to.
Going back to a couple of pieces around when you're away on tour in a different country. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it here. Yes, do you have any examples of where a host was very difficult to work with, and how did you resolve those issues?
Oh yeah, plenty. So we've had some really positive experiences with people that were great to work with, and some challenging areas. You know, I won't name countries, but there's been some that are very difficult. And so instead of being my friendly, nice self where I'm trying to build a relationship, I might need to get tough and say, this is a standard that we expect, and this is what's agreed upon prior to coming here. This is what you need to make happen, and just kind of play hardball with it. That can be quite challenging because you're also dealing with a situation where you need them to help you as well in the end. So it's trying to balance that, you know, forceful, this is what my team needs and I'm not standing for less, along with also understanding that you're still in their country and you have to kind of work with it and just try to make the best of the situations.
Right. And so when working with some of the liaisons specifically, in your planning, do you have specific roles for them prior to you going, and do you communicate that ahead of time, or do you kind of wait to see what kind of skills they bring and then work with them throughout that tour period to see how they can help?
Yeah, so I mean, I have a general idea of what we need from a liaison, and I would communicate that with them ahead of time if I get their contact information ahead of time. So things that a liaison does for us is, you know, going early to the training sessions with our S&C coach to get all the equipment set up and make sure we're good to go. They would come with us if we were going to a hospital, those types of things that, you know, require someone who's local to take you there. And then also just, you know, if I get there and I'm speaking to them and they have an interest in something, a certain area that we're working in, I'll make sure that they get an opportunity to see that and see how we're functioning. You know, as much as I need the liaisons, they also are there for an experience and to see how we do things and get involved and, you know, learn something different about a high performance rugby environment. So I want to bring them in as much as possible, but we have to build trust in that first, and make sure that there's someone that is going to take that information and use it for what they need rather than, you know, giving it to the opposing team or something like that. So just building that relationship and understanding them. If you can speak to them before you arrive, that's even better. But just, you know, setting the tone with them of this is what we need and this is where you can help me in particular areas about, you know, whether it's support with language or support with finding a place to get jerseys numbered or something like that. I would try to give them as much heads up as possible.
Okay, great. You mentioned earlier having a leadership team. Yes, it is the play. They were saying they guess it's athletes. Yes, it's usually the athletes. One of the roles being entertainment. What are some of the other roles, and how does a manager work with some of them to make sure that they, you know, are part of the team culture?
Yeah, so I think some of the other roles that we've had in the past, one was information. So it might be someone's responsible to get up on the bus and say, you know, this is where we are, and these are some of the things that this place is known for. So it gives the guys a bit of a taste of the culture. So that's a piece of that. And then just a laundry group. So someone who is responsible to make sure that, you know, check that laundry was picked up, or we might have to be doing laundry ourselves. So it's balancing that and trying to make sure that we have people who are responsible. The on-field leadership is a key one, but obviously that's more managed by the head coach than myself. And then other ones that we've had, well, entertainment was a key one. we've had a food lead, so someone who would come to me and say if there's any issues with the food that we need to adjust, whether it's, you know, we need more variety or, you know, it's coming out late or things like that. So just having a person that I would go to check in if there's any issues, so that the guys also know who they would go to in the team to say, hey, this is an issue we need to address. So then I have a point person.
Okay, great. We're gonna try and ram off a couple more, as many more as we can here in the last 5 minutes, Alana. But what do you use as your primary organizational tool?
Well, my number one thing, and everyone who knows me knows that I love Excel. I love a good spreadsheet. That for me is my main tool that I use. I have an Excel document for every tour, and there's about 30 different tabs on it with all the information that I need for tours. So it's all in one place. I find that really easy to use, and I think it's probably, you know, it's something that comes on every computer, so it's not something that you need to pay for, and it's just something that it's great to have that skill if you're a team manager. Being organized and having your spreadsheets is my key, I think. Any other ones, Dave?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. What is your primary communications tool in working with players, staff, and other people who might be involved in the tour that you're on?
So from a team perspective, we use WhatsApp to communicate. So I would set up a team chat where everyone's in that, and then I set up a staff only chat to make sure that we can all be communicating and on the same page about things. We've trialed different things throughout the years, whether we have a chat group so that it's just for, you know, a bit of fun or some light stuff for the tour, and then we have a schedule group where anything that goes out on that is key information for people to know, and there's no chatter on that. So then the schedules for the following day don't get lost. But that's how we're communicating day in and day out with the group. And then if we're talking about external suppliers, it's usually by email. But if people are more comfortable on different formats, I would use that. So sometimes I would communicate with WhatsApp, or I've had a couple of liaison message on Facebook, which is not ideal, but it's, you know, however we can best utilize other people's skills. So if I have to work on a different medium, that's fine. But usually email, WhatsApp are the main two.
Awesome. Good question here. Knowing that obviously Rugby Canada might be a bit different than a provincial or especially a local club team or high school team, but how do you budget for contingencies? Do you work on a percentage basis, or do you just kind of have a set amount that you know you'll likely have to dip into?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we have probably a 5% contingency. There's always going to be things that you don't expect, but then there's always going to be things that are maybe cheaper than you expected. So having that budget to, you know, having a bit of flexibility to play with is key, but understanding that, you know, I'm quite tight on budgets. I make sure that we're controlling our spending because that's what we need to do in order to make sure that we can still have enough money to go on other tours and things. So keeping things reasonable while still making sure that we're delivering what the team needs. So yeah, probably a small contingency that we would do as a general 5% for the overall budget.
Awesome. I'm going to try and get to two more. What do you think your biggest learning from Rugby World Cup 2015 and or 19 would be?
Ooh, I think my biggest learning from World Cups is that you need to, when you have a larger staff group, we go from a normal tour that we'd have about 10 staff, which is still a decent number, but we go from 10 to 15 staff. So for me, that's a pretty big jump, and that's a big challenge of trying to make sure that there's roles for each person and then everyone knows what their roles are. So I think role clarity is one of the keys that we need to look at to make sure that everyone's doing their piece to keep the team successful. So I go from having just myself on a tour as a team manager and baggage person and security and all of the other pieces and media to having myself and an assistant manager or a baggage person and all of the other roles. So managing that and kind of, I think delegating was something that I learned. It's not something I do very often because I'm responsible overall for my area. So I think having that support of other people is important to understand that you have that and make sure you utilize them.
Awesome. Jamie McKenzie wants to know whether or not the rumors are true and he is in fact the most difficult player to work with.
Well, I'm not going to call anybody out, but I think you can take from this what you will, Jamie.
Fair enough. You also got a shout out from South Africa as well. I think I've lost the actual note, but a friend of yours, Ashley Everett, says hello. Alana, I want to say a huge thank you for your time tonight. There was a lot of great information there for people who are looking to take a team out on tour at all levels. Of course, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to fire us an email. Alana, I see you have a note there. Did you want to make a plug for those who are interested in joining the management team?
What I would say is if there's anyone who's looking to get more experience working in team management, contact your local club, your high school, your provincial union, get in touch with them to see if there's any way you can provide support or get some experience. And then if you have some experience, maybe you're working at the provincial level or elsewhere, maybe in high performance sport, and you're interested in getting involved, we're always looking for tour managers for our national age grade programs. So if this is something that's of interest to you and you feel that you have a skill set that you can provide support here, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to work with you. And I'm, in this time period where we don't have any tours on the go, this is the time where we're happy to support our community. So if people have specific questions or they're looking for some guidance, I'm happy to provide that. And you can just email info@rugby.ca and then I'll get the email over to me and we'll get in touch with you if you have specific stuff you want support on.
Awesome. Folks, we never get to all of the questions. We truly appreciate everyone's time. Just a reminder, Tuesday, April something coming up next week. My math is terrible. We are going to have, she's looking at 21st. Nope, that's the 14th. Next Tuesday, the 14th, April 14th, we have Callum Ramsey joining us to talk about the principles of analysis. And then on Thursday, we have David Butcher coming to join us to talk about refereeing sorry, not refereeing, that's me, coaching the offensive breakdown. We look forward to everyone joining us. Thanks once again, Alana. Have a great evening.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the time.